Okay, so we have our thin outline, fairly consistent line width all the way around, and our light source established. Okay, so where the light hits first, which is up here, your contour is not going to be as heavy. So you're going to have a heavier contour in a space where it's darker, right? And of course this can be adjusted as you're working along, or perhaps you end up adding the contour, like a heavier contour, after you start shading. You can always do that, and you'll find as you're working that you may end up needing to reinforce contours. That's pretty normal. One thing about having a heavier contour, where you, at the very least where you absolutely know it's going to be darker, is whenever you go to shade and your lines go to meet up with the contour, is less likelihood of you slipping over the contour, which some of you may have experienced that at some point. Okay, so let's just say that I'm going to just draw a little guide here. And again, this is from our imagination. If you're looking at a picture, then you'll have, something more definitive to work from. But we're making this up. So I'm going to draw just a little line here. And this is going to be that indicator of, well, this space is, I'll draw a little higher. This space is definitely going to be darker. Okay. So what I can do is start reinforcing the contour in that area. And I'm going to zoom in a little here. You can see that I'm cutting next to the line. So there's a couple ways to do this. If you have already cut a pretty deep line to begin with, which I didn't do, but if you have, you can cut a line next to the line to make it thicker. Okay, so what you don't want to do is, if you have a heavy line already, is to just keep digging in the same line and making it deeper and deeper and deeper, because that could be, that could be problematic. Now let's say you have a petal or a leaf form that has a fold in it, and the one that I have you to draw from doesn't really have any really dramatic ones, but we'll draw a dramatic one on here just so you can see that. So let's say we have a fold that's coming from the top up here. So I could have it come off here, and notice it's not meeting the edge here. So adding something as simple as this line here creates that little fold effect without it going all the way to the edge, right? Because we need this space. And sometimes it can get a little tight too. I think it's a pretty tight space on the very subtle fold on the actual example. And you can get in close there, but it doesn't actually hit the contour on the other side. Now for this, because it's just one little line here, I'm just going to scribe it gently. My little map there. And cut that. Now what we can do, so the edge of the contour on that fold is a little more fades out more. It's a little more subtle, more gentle, less, I suppose, abrupt. As you can actually stipple that out. And I'm going to turn the machine off because I don't need it to do this. And you can do like a dotted line fading out of the fold, and you see it creates this very soft line, right? And then you can space out your dots just to have it fade out a bit more. Okay, so we're going to make up some areas where light could be, or where shadow could be on here. Right, so our light source is drawn right there. We have this space right here that's blocking light, and we have what's going to be this this rounded space here as it gradually gets darker. We may end up adding more to that contour there. So I'm going to first draw this shape here. And again, in some ways this will be easier when you have an actual image to work from. And we'll lay out a tone in that space, and actually let's say for our purposes here, we'll do it from there. That's what I'll do. And then we'll add something else. Okay, so you could work from your pencil as your implied line, right? And you did this already with your previous project where you drew the tones that the lines actually fit in. So we're doing something similar to that here. And maybe just for something a little more solid that I'm not worried about moving or changing or wiping off, I can go over it with a marker. Okay, so let's say we were gonna fill this in with a tone, and I'm gonna follow this line right here over this way. That way I know the exact shape that I'm gonna end up doing. So I have like a little cutoff here, and I'm just kind of following that fold down. All right, so last time we did a bunch of straight lines. And what I'm going to want you to try on this is to do some subtle curves. Nothing really dramatic. It's just the subtle curves make for perhaps a bit more of a dynamic rounding out of the form. And you can intermix both of them where it is appropriate. So just as a little guide here, we're used to doing this, these straight lines, and what we're going to end up doing is just a very subtle curve around the form, and we'll fill in this space with those curves. So remember how we kind of mapped it out, where we drew our little space that was going to go in, like we spaced them out like this so we could try to get some consistency and actually make it a little visually easier to handle. You can go all the way across like this, knowing that you're not going to cut all the way over there. It's just helping you with how you're going to place your curve. Okay, so since it's lighter on this side, I'm cutting towards the contour because the line's going to get heavier as I get to the contour. So start at your marker and then cut towards, and just do, it's not a dramatic curve, it's just a very subtle curve. It's a very simple, subtle curve. We'll do the same up here, so we'll draw a little shape for that as well. And I'm gonna try to make it match up with how those initial curves look. So this little flap right here is blocking light. Which is why I'm doing this. And these kind of flow like this direction. And these, these are all pretty straight, but they're really short. But just trying to keep that spirit of the curve going on the longer lines, I'm drawing it this way. And we can work those in. Looks like I already started to deviate. I'm gonna have to get some alcohol because that's on there pretty good. Our hand sanitizer. Way more than I needed. And keep my little arrow. Well, I guess I can draw it again. Yeah, it is pretty important to get that marker off to, you know, at the right time. You know, I had it all pretty laid out there because the marker is really distracting to what's actually going on. So I've had students in the past that have done they drew out their entire contour in a marker, which they should, and then cut through the marker instead of scribing it. And then, which you can do, but you need to manage your expectations as far as what that's going to look like when you wipe it off, because the contour from a marker is just by default much wider than a graver. And I'm going to start cutting towards the line in here. That would make more sense to do that. So just know if you end up doing something like that when you wipe the Sharpie off, if you choose to do that, to cut through the Sharpie, just know there's going to be more work to be done after that, because it's going to change the way you perceive the image on the plate. Okay, so now I'm going to go into some hatching off of the edge here. And this edge here. So our light's coming this way, and it's going to gradually get a little darker, right? So we're going to leave some information not hatched. So I'm going to draw the shape of where I want it darker, and if it's easier for you, you can just kind of color it like you're drawing with a pencil, because you are. Maybe that helps, but just establishing that shape. Now, the way that I've drawn it here, I've drawn it in such a way that I can have some reflected light off of the edge. Alright, so in drawing, whenever you drew from life, whenever the light hits something white or light on the other side, even though that this is dark, it'll bounce back on the edge, and it will create just like this really light, this subtle value change that's on the edge. One of the nice things about doing is integrating that in your drawing is if you have multiple forms, like you have a stack of forms or whatever, like in this case I had, like say I had a bunch of petals on here, and this was really dark right here. If I had a value here that was similar to what's over here, some of that information might get lost, right? So if I utilize some reflected light on the edge, that will actually help separate this form from this form if it's somewhat similar in a dark value. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and just work on this shape here, and again, it'll be easier for me to see it if I go over it with a marker. All of these lines are going to be fairly short, right, as I'm layering here. And I'm going to do, you could do these with a subtle curve, or you could do them straight. It'd be easier to do them straight when it's much shorter, right? And then you can gradually do a little curve at the end. Or just do them straight the whole time, it's okay. The important part is just the principle of layering, right? Just like you did on your previous one, all of those were straight. They weren't, none of them were curved. It was how much you layered it in the appropriate space. Okay, so and whenever they're really short like this, in a small little space like that, I like to use my pointer finger like this as a guide, and it enables me to move a bit faster. Also, if it's short like this, if I use my pointer finger, I can curve the point of the tool around my finger instead of actually turning the entire positioning vise. It makes doing short curves much easier. I don't know if you can see it, I'm doing that. I'm using my pointer finger, and it's kind of very subtly curving around the point instead of turning the whole positioning vise to try to get a curve. Obviously that's less effective on long marks. This is really for shorter marks. As I'm getting here, I'm starting to kind of push it. And now I'm getting towards, yeah, now I'm going to start turning the positioning vise. Okay, so on edges like this, to make it pop a little more, so I already hatched on it, but I could push this fold out a little bit more. I can go back in and put a series of short lines very close to the edge and add another value to it, and I'll just put a little outline here where it's going to get much darker. As you can see, we're really starting to push that little lip forward, that little fold forward. But I can even still, I see that there's still a little light in there that I don't want after wiping it, and I can get even closer and put like little stippling, little dots on the edge there, just to push it a little bit further, particularly in the area that it dips down more. There's too much light in here, so I'm gonna just add a little more in that space. When I'm going this short, I can get away with just holding the button down and just doing quick little marks. And you can see just by adding that to the edge, it really darkens that space and really makes that fold pop out a bit more. And then once I've completed that, you know, obviously it's very hard to, you can see I have a little bit of overlap there. In a space where you know that you're going to be making a lot of hatch marks like that, you can, once you're done, just go back at the end and go over that contour, just lightly go over that contour. And this is supposed to be a bit darker anyway, and you may be able to take off any areas that you accidentally went over, just to clean it up. So within that shape, putting in a set of lines to create this small crease. Okay, you see what a difference that's made already. So I've just pushed in that little spot, right? Now let's say you want that's not enough for you. You want the edge to be a little more exaggerated. You really want it to stick out just a little bit more. On the very edge, you could, on the very end of your implied line, just do some really short hatching, and that will make that, because you're increasing the contrast, will make that little area stick out some more. Okay, I'm doing that with my nail because they're so tiny. I'm not going to cut myself. This isn't one of those do as I say, not as I do things. I would never do that with a heavy burr, okay? Okay, does that make sense? You see, like this, it's a really subtle thing to do, but you see how much it changes it, right? Pushes the fold just a little bit further. And obviously you're not going to need to use that every time. Just if you see something that has a strong crease in it, that's a way to approach it. Or even to create a subtle value within a crease. So again, for this, I'm just covering this side because it's similar to your study. or your visual source that you're going to work from, and then add wrinkles inside of that space or creases.